I will do anything to save my grandmother, even if it means walking into the home of the most feared man in Chicago." I said those words before I understood what they would cost me. It was a Tuesday morning when the hospital called, and I knew something was wrong before the nurse finished saying my name. My grandmother, Evelyn Bennett, had been waiting for a new treatment, one the doctors believed could give her a better chance, but the cost was far beyond anything I could afford. I sat alone at my tiny kitchen table, staring at the number on the estimate until the digits blurred. I had savings. Not enough. I had a freelance design job. Not enough. I had called everyone I trusted. Nobody had an answer. Then the nurse mentioned another possibility. A private foundation had offered assistance in cases like Grandma's, but the person who controlled the foundation rarely helped strangers. His name was Adrian Blackwood. I had heard that name before. Everyone in Chicago had. Adrian Blackwood was not a businessman people casually approached. He was known as the Mafia King, a man whose influence reached far beyond the polished offices and expensive buildings connected to his name. I did not know which stories were true. I only knew that when I searched his name, I found very few photographs and even fewer people willing to discuss him. Still, I called the number on the card the nurse gave me. A woman answered. "Mr. Blackwood can see you at 4. Today. Today. Where?" She gave me an address on the north side. I wrote it down with a hand that would not stop trembling. At 3:47 p.m., I stood outside a dark stone building surrounded by quiet streets and tall trees. There were no dramatic signs, no crowd, nothing that announced who lived there. That almost made it worse. I pressed the intercom. The door opened seconds later. A man in a dark suit led me through a quiet marble hallway into a private study. Adrian was standing beside the window when I entered. He was taller than I expected, dressed simply in a charcoal suit, his dark hair neatly styled, his expression calm enough to make the entire room feel still. He looked at me once, then at the folder in my hands. "Sophia Bennett." It was not a question. "Yes. Your grandmother is Evelyn Bennett." My throat tightened. "How do you know her?" Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the desk and opened a file. I saw Grandma's name written across the top. Beneath it were medical documents, dates, and notes I had never seen. "Your grandmother needs treatment quickly," he said. "I can arrange it." I stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I owe her something." My heart skipped. "You know my grandmother?" His eyes met mine. For the first time, the controlled expression on his face changed. It was not pity. It was something older, something personal. "I knew her a long time ago." I stepped closer to the desk. "Then tell me why you are helping her." Adrian closed the folder. "Because once, your grandmother helped me when I had nothing." The room seemed to grow quieter. I had come expecting a powerful stranger to demand something in return. Instead, he was talking about a debt that had apparently existed long before I ever knew his name. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Adrian looked at me for several seconds. Then he said something that changed everything. "Nothing from you, Sophia. But if you want me to save your grandmother, you are going to have to trust me." I thought saving my grandmother would be the hard part. I was wrong. Trusting the man who could make it possible was harder. Adrian's words followed me all the way home that night. Nothing from our meeting made sense. He had offered to arrange Grandma's treatment without asking for money, favors, or anything that sounded like the dangerous bargain I had expected. Yet somehow, that made me more uneasy. People like Adrian Blackwood did not simply give away millions of dollars worth of medical care. There had to be a reason. I arrived at Grandma's apartment a little after 7 p.m. and found her sitting beside the living room window with a blanket around her shoulders, reading the same magazine she had been pretending to read for 20 minutes. She looked up when I entered. "You met him?" I froze. "How did you know?" Grandma smiled faintly. "Because you have that expression." "What expression?" "The one you had when you were 8 and tried to hide the broken vase." I laughed despite myself. Then I sat beside her. "Grandma, who is Adrian Blackwood?" Her smile disappeared. Not completely, just enough for me to notice. "Where did you hear that name?" "He offered to pay for your treatment." She became very still. "He did what?" "He knows you." I watched her carefully. "He said you helped him a long time ago." Grandma looked toward the window. Chicago traffic moved below us, headlights sliding across the glass like tiny rivers of light. "Adrian was a boy when I knew him," she finally said. "A troubled boy." "How old?" "Around 10, maybe 11. I stared at her. "You never told me." There are things from the past I did not think mattered anymore. They matter now. Grandma reached for my hand. Her fingers felt warm but fragile. Sophia, what exactly did he ask you for? Nothing. Nothing. He said I needed to trust him. Grandma closed her eyes for a moment. Then he has changed. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Before she could answer, my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar Chicago number. I answered cautiously. Hello. Adrian's voice came through, calm and unmistakable. Your grandmother has been admitted to the private clinic. I stood immediately. What? Her treatment team is ready. Everything has been arranged. I looked at Grandma. She was already watching me. You moved her without asking me? No. Your grandmother approved the transfer. I turned toward her. Grandma gave me a small nod. How? I asked. Your insurance paperwork was incomplete. The clinic can begin treatment once the remaining documents are signed. And you handled all of that? Yes. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. Why are you doing this? Silence filled the phone for a moment. Then Adrian answered more quietly. Because your grandmother once gave me a place to sit when everyone else had decided I did not belong anywhere. I looked at Grandma again. Her eyes were wet. She gave me dinner, Adrian continued. She listened to me. She never asked what I could give her in return. My voice softened. So this is repayment. Partly. What is the other part? Another pause. Your grandmother asked me to make sure you were safe. My heart stopped for a second. She asked you. Before you came to see me. Grandma looked away. I felt something shift inside me. This was no longer a simple financial arrangement. My grandmother had known Adrian long before I ever heard his name. And apparently, there was a reason she trusted him enough to place my future in his hands. Where is the clinic? I asked. Adrian gave me the address. I will meet you there. You do not have to. I know. His voice was steady. I am coming anyway. The call ended. I looked at Grandma. You knew he would help me. She reached for my hand again. I knew he would help you if you were brave enough to ask. I looked down at our joined hands. For the first time, I wondered whether I had walked into Adrian Blackwood's world by accident, or whether my grandmother had been quietly guiding me toward him all along. The first thing I noticed at the private clinic was the silence. No crowded waiting room. No ringing phones. No television playing in the corner. Just polished floors, soft lights, and the quiet hum of an elevator somewhere behind the reception desk. I had expected a hospital. Instead, Adrian had brought my grandmother into a place that looked more like a private hotel designed for people who never had to worry about medical bills. I stepped through the glass doors with my purse clutched against my side, and Adrian was already there. He stood near the reception desk in a dark suit, speaking quietly with a doctor. When he saw me, he ended the conversation immediately. Sophia, where's my grandmother? Room 412. He walked beside me toward the elevators. The doctors have reviewed her records. They are preparing the treatment. I pressed the elevator button. You make everything sound so simple. It is not simple. He looked at me. It is organized. I almost smiled. That sounds like something a Mafia King would say. His expression barely changed. I have been called worse. The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside. I watched the numbers climb. 4, 5, 6. Adrian. Yes. Why did you really want to help my grandmother? He did not answer. The elevator continued upward. 7, 8, 9. You already told me she helped you. She did. That cannot be the whole story. His eyes met mine in the mirrored wall. For 1 second, something passed across his face. Regret. Maybe. Then it disappeared. You should focus on your grandmother. The doors opened. I followed him down the hallway. Grandma was awake when we entered. She looked tired, but she smiled when she saw me. There you are. I sat beside her immediately. Adrian stayed near the doorway. The doctor explained the treatment schedule, the medications, and what we could expect over the next several days. Everything was calm, clear, reassuring. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders loosen. Grandma would have a chance. A real one. After the doctor left, I turned toward Adrian. Thank you. He nodded once. You are welcome. Grandma looked between us. You two should talk. Grandma, I said. I am serious, she replied. Adrian's expression softened slightly. Rest, Evelyn. He left the room. I followed him into the hallway. Wait. He stopped. What? She knows something. Yes. You know something. He looked at me without speaking. What happened between you and my grandmother years ago? That is not a conversation for a hospital hallway. Then where? He hesitated. My house. I frowned. Your house. It is quieter. I do not think going to the home of the Mafia King is exactly what most people would call relaxing. His mouth almost curved into a smile. Most people do not know my house. I am beginning to think I do not know you either. That erased the almost smile. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small photograph. He held it toward me. I took it carefully. The picture was old, the edges worn and pale. It showed my grandmother standing outside a small neighborhood house, much younger than I had ever seen her. Beside her was a boy of about 10 years old. He had dark hair, serious eyes, and the same unmistakable expression Adrian carried now. My fingers tightened around the photograph. That is you. Adrian nodded. Yes. I looked at the boy again. What happened? His voice dropped almost to a whisper. Your grandmother found me when I had nowhere to go. I looked up, and then Adrian's eyes moved toward the photograph. Then she did something I have never forgotten. What? He looked directly at me. She invited me inside. The photograph stayed in my hand long after Adrian walked away. I could still feel the worn paper between my fingers, the edges soft from years of being carried and forgotten. I followed him out of the clinic and into the cold Chicago evening, but my thoughts were still inside that picture. A little boy, my grandmother, a doorway, one simple invitation that apparently changed a life. You said she found you, I said as we reached the lobby. Adrian stopped beneath the warm marble lights. I did. Where? A neighborhood on the south side. Years ago. And you never saw her again? He looked toward the glass doors. Not for a long time. Then why now? His expression tightened. Because I found out she was sick. I stared at him. How? Someone told me. Who? He did not answer. That silence told me more than words could have. Adrian had resources, connections, people who could find almost anything. But he was not using them to intimidate anyone. He was using them to keep track of one elderly woman who had once given him a meal. That contradiction unsettled me. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying the sharp smell of winter. Adrian opened the door for me. You should go back to your grandmother. I stepped outside, then turned. You still have not told me what she did for you. He looked at the photograph in my hand. She gave me a reason to believe I could become someone different. His voice was quiet. That is enough. I walked back toward the clinic room, but I could not stop thinking about his words. By the next morning, Grandma's treatment had officially begun. The doctors were optimistic, though careful. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. Then I discovered something I did not expect. A private nurse brought breakfast to Grandma's room, including the cinnamon toast she had mentioned once during our first consultation. Grandma smiled when she saw it. Adrian remembered. I looked at her. You told him that. Years ago. He remembers your breakfast order from years ago? Grandma gave me a knowing smile. Some people remember what matters. I did not answer. Instead, I looked through the glass wall toward the hallway. Adrian stood there speaking with the doctor. He noticed me watching him. Our eyes met. He gave a small nod. Nothing more. Somehow, that simple gesture felt more personal than anything he had said. Later that afternoon, he came into the room with a folder. The clinic needs a few signatures, he said. I can handle them. I reached for the folder. No, I will read them first. He handed it to me without argument. That surprised me. You are not going to tell me what to do. No, why? Because you asked me not to. I looked up. His answer was simple. It should not have mattered so much. But it did. Adrian sat in the chair across from me while I reviewed the documents. For the first time, I saw the man beneath the reputation. Not the name people whispered. Not the power everyone associated with him. Just a man sitting quietly in a hospital room because my grandmother mattered to him. I closed the folder. Thank you. He nodded. How are you feeling? The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked me that all week. I looked at my grandmother sleeping peacefully behind the curtain. Then I looked back at him. Tired. Adrian leaned back slightly. Then rest. I almost smiled. You are surprisingly good at giving simple advice. I am better at complicated problems. I noticed. For the first time, he smiled. It was brief, almost invisible, but real. Then his phone vibrated. His expression changed as he read the message. He stood immediately. What happened? I asked. Adrian slipped the phone into his pocket. Nothing you need to worry about. I watched him walk toward the door. Adrian. He stopped. I could hear my own heartbeat. If it concerns my grandmother, I need to know. He turned slowly. His voice was calm, but the warmth had disappeared from his eyes. Then you need to come with me. Then you need to come with me. Adrian's words followed me into the hallway, and for 1 second I could not move. Where? I asked. Somewhere private. That sounds reassuring. His expression softened slightly. It is safer than staying here. I glanced through the glass toward Grandma's room. She was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the conversation happening outside. I am not leaving her. You are not leaving her. Adrian pointed toward the nurse's station. The medical team will continue monitoring her. You will be able to check on her at any time. I studied his face. Then why do I need to go? Because someone has been asking questions about her. My stomach tightened. What kind of questions? Questions about her history. Her treatment. You. The hallway suddenly felt colder. Who? I do not know yet. He paused. That is why I want you somewhere I can keep an eye on the situation. I folded my arms. You keep saying protection, but you have not told me what I am supposed to be protected from. I am trying to find out. His voice remained calm. And until I do, I would rather have you close. The words should have frightened me. Instead, they created a strange sense of relief. I hated that. I hated how quickly I was beginning to trust him. Fine, I said, but I have conditions. One eyebrow lifted. Conditions? I choose where I sleep. I keep my phone. I can visit Grandma whenever I want. You do not make decisions for me unless there is an actual emergency. Adrian considered each point. Agreed. I blinked. That easily? You asked for boundaries. I am respecting them. Something about the answer stayed with me. We left the clinic through a private entrance and drove across Chicago as the afternoon faded into evening. Adrian sat beside me in the back seat, quiet, looking through the window. I expected him to receive calls, issue instructions, behave like the man people whispered about. Instead, he simply watched the city pass by. Do you always live like this? I asked. Like what? With people solving everything before you even have to ask. He looked at me. No one solves everything. It seems like you do. That is what people think. And what do you think? He looked back toward the window. I think. Some problems cannot be solved. They can only be carried. I did not know what to say to that. His house stood behind tall iron gates on a quiet tree-lined street. It was elegant without being flashy, an old Chicago mansion restored with warm stone, dark wood, and wide windows. Inside, everything was immaculate. Too immaculate. There were no photographs on the walls. No clutter. No signs that anyone actually lived there. This feels less like a home and more like a museum, I said. Adrian almost smiled. I have heard that before. A house manager showed me to a guest room overlooking the garden. It was comfortable, spacious, and completely impersonal. I set my bag on the chair and noticed something on the bedside table. A small framed photograph. It was the same photograph Adrian had shown me at the clinic. Grandma stood beside the young boy outside that old house. I picked it up carefully. There was handwriting on the back. I turned it over. For words were written in faded ink. I read them twice. You are welcome here, Adrian. My breath caught. He had kept it all these years. I heard footsteps behind me. Adrian stood in the doorway. His eyes went immediately to the photograph in my hand. She wrote that. I whispered. Yes. You kept it. He nodded. I kept everything she gave me. I looked at him, suddenly understanding that his gratitude was deeper than I had imagined. Then he said something that changed the meaning of the entire evening. Sophia, there is something about your grandmother you still do not know. There is something about your grandmother you still do not know. I looked at Adrian across the doorway, the old photograph still resting in my hand. What does that mean? He stepped into the room, but kept a respectful distance between us. It means the woman you know as your grandmother once changed the direction of my entire life. I waited. He seemed to be choosing every word carefully. When I was about 11, I had nowhere stable to go. I was moving between places, sleeping wherever someone would let me stay. One winter evening, I ended up outside your grandmother's house. And she let you in. She did. He looked toward the photograph. She gave me food, a blanket, a place at her kitchen table. She did not ask questions I could not answer. I swallowed. Why did she not tell me? Because she never wanted credit. He paused. But that is not the part she kept from you. My chest tightened. Then what is? Adrian walked to a small cabinet and opened the drawer. He removed an envelope that looked almost as old as the photograph. Your grandmother kept this for years. She gave it to me when I found her again. He handed it to me. My name was written across the front in Grandma's familiar handwriting. Sophia. My fingers went cold. She wrote this. Yes. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single letter. The paper shook slightly as I unfolded it. Dear Sophia, if you are reading this, then Adrian has finally decided that you deserve to know the truth. I stopped breathing for a moment. I continued. Years ago, I helped a young boy who needed someone to believe in him. I never expected anything in return. I certainly never expected that boy to grow into the man people now fear. But Adrian never forgot. He came back into my life years later, not as the frightened child I remembered, but as someone determined to make sure I would never have to worry about anything again. I looked up at Adrian. She knew you would help her. I told her I would. When, years ago, my eyes returned to the letter. Grandma had written that she trusted Adrian, but she also warned me not to confuse gratitude with obligation. That sentence stopped me. She knew me too well. She knew I would feel indebted. She knew I would think I had to accept Adrian's protection simply because he was paying for her treatment. At the bottom of the letter, she had written one final line. You owe him nothing. Choose what makes you feel safe. I lowered the paper slowly. Adrian was watching me. She told you that? I asked. She told me the same thing. Then why did you bring me here? His answer came without hesitation. Because she asked me to give you a choice. A choice? Yes. You can stay here while she receives treatment, or you can leave. I will still pay for everything. I stared at him. You would help her even if I walked away. Of course. Why? He looked at the photograph of himself as a boy. Because your grandmother helped me when she had no reason to. The room became quiet. For the first time since this began, I realized Adrian was not asking me to repay him. He was giving me something I had almost forgotten existed. A choice. I folded Grandma's letter and held it against my chest. I will stay, I said. Adrian nodded. Then you will stay because you want to. I looked into his eyes. Yes. He turned toward the door, but before he left, I asked one more question. Adrian. He stopped. What happened after my grandmother invited you inside? His shoulders became still. When he finally answered, his voice was softer than before. She became the first person who ever made me believe I could have a different life. The first thing I noticed was the sound of rain against the windows. It was just after midnight, and Adrian's house had become so quiet that every drop seemed to echo through the hallway. I had barely slept since Grandma's treatment began. I kept thinking about her letter, the photograph, and the boy she had once welcomed into her home. But that night, something felt different. Adrian had left the house earlier, saying he needed to handle a private matter. He had not explained what it was. I told myself that was normal. I told myself I did not need to know everything about his life. Then my phone rang. It was the clinic. My heart dropped before I answered. Miss Bennett, your grandmother is fine, the nurse said quickly. But there is something you should know. I sat up in bed. What happened? Someone came to the clinic asking about her records. My fingers tightened around the blanket. Who? We do not know. They left before security could speak with them. I stared into the darkness. Did they ask for my grandmother by name? Yes. The room suddenly felt smaller. I am coming there. I reached for my coat, but before I could open the bedroom door, Adrian was standing in the hallway. I froze. His hair was damp from the rain, and his dark coat was still buttoned. He looked tired. Focused. You hurt? I asked. Yes. Grandma is safe. I know. Then why are you here? He stepped closer, stopping several feet away. Because I did not want you finding out from someone else. I waited. The person at the clinic was not there by accident, he said. Do you know who it was? Not yet. Then I should go see Grandma. You can. His answer surprised me. But you are not going alone. I crossed my arms. That sounds like an order. It is a request. I looked at him. You are getting better at that. A faint smile appeared on his face. Then it disappeared. Sophia, I need you to understand something. My world has rules that I cannot always explain to you. But I will never make a decision about you without giving you a choice. I studied him. What changed? His eyes lowered for a moment. You did. The answer landed quietly. I did not know what to say. We left for the clinic a few minutes later. Adrian arranged for us to enter through the private entrance, and the nurse met us immediately. Grandma was awake. She looked tired but comfortable. I sat beside her and took her hand. Are you all right? I am fine, she whispered. Then she looked past me at Adrian. You came. Of course. Grandma smiled. You always did keep your promises. Adrian's expression softened. You taught me to. I looked between them. There was a history there I could feel, but still could not fully understand. While Grandma rested, I stepped into the hallway with Adrian. I want to help, I said. I do not want to sit here while you handle everything. He nodded. Then help me. I blinked. How? He handed me a copy of the visitor log. Look at the names. I scanned the list. Doctors, nurses, family members, delivery staff. Then one name caught my attention. It was not a name I recognized. Who is Daniel Mercer? Adrian's expression changed immediately. Where did you see that? I pointed to the page. Here. He signed in 2 hours ago. Adrian took the paper. He read the name once. Then again. That name should not be here. My stomach tightened. Why? He looked at me. Because Daniel Mercer has been dead for 6 years. The name on the visitor log should not have existed. I stared at it until the letters seemed to blur together. Daniel Mercer. 6 years gone, according to Adrian. Yet someone had signed that name at my grandmother's clinic only 2 hours earlier. How do you know he is dead? I asked. Adrian folded the visitor log and handed it back to me. Because I was there when his family held the funeral. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Then someone is using his name. That is what I think. Why would anyone care about Grandma? Adrian looked toward the hospital room where she was sleeping. Because people from my past sometimes look for old connections. And Grandma is one of those connections. Yes. I took a slow breath. The fear was there, but underneath it was something stronger. I was tired of standing beside problems while other people solved them for me. Then let me help. Adrian studied me. This is not your world. Neither was any of this 3 days ago. He said nothing. I continued. You told me I could choose. I choose to understand what is happening. Something changed in his expression. Respect, perhaps. All right. He led me into a quiet consultation room at the end of the hallway. The lights were low. Rain tapped against the windows. Adrian placed several documents on the table, but he did not push them toward me until I nodded. The first was a photograph of Daniel Mercer. The second was a list of old business names. The third was a photograph of a small neighborhood house. My heart stopped. I knew that house. That is Grandma's old home. Adrian nodded. The one where she met me. I looked closer. There was another person standing near the front steps. An older man in a gray coat. Who is he? Adrian leaned over the photograph. That is Daniel Mercer. I looked up sharply. But you said he died 6 years ago. He did. Then why is he in this picture? Adrian was silent for a moment. Because this photograph was taken 20 years ago. I looked at the date printed beneath it. My stomach tightened. Grandma had been keeping more secrets than I ever imagined. What connection did he have to her? I asked. He was involved with a community foundation that helped families in that neighborhood. Was he a good man? Adrian's expression remained unreadable. I do not know. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have. I sat back. So someone used his name to access the clinic. Yes. And you think it has something to do with Grandma's past? I think someone wants me to believe that. I frowned. Why? Adrian looked directly at me. Because if I focus on your grandmother, I may miss what they are really after. My breath caught. Me? He did not answer immediately. Then he said, possibly. The room became very still. I thought about Grandma's letter. You owe him nothing. Choose what makes you feel safe. I realized something then. Adrian was giving me the choice he had promised, but he was also trying to keep me from being afraid. What would you do if I told you I wanted to leave? I asked. He answered without hesitation. I would arrange a safe place for you and continue paying for your grandmother's treatment. Even if that meant you could not protect me? Yes. His honesty surprised me. And if I stay? His eyes softened. Then I will tell you everything I know. I looked through the glass at Grandma sleeping peacefully in her room. Then I looked back at Adrian. I am staying. He nodded once. Then there is something you need to see. He opened a folder and placed one final photograph on the table. It showed my grandmother many years ago, standing outside her old house with the young Adrian beside her. But this time, there was another detail. A handwritten note was visible in Grandma's hand. Adrian turned the photograph toward me. Read the back. I did. My hands went cold. The message was only one sentence. If anything happens to me, protect Sophia. The words on the back of the photograph stayed with me all night. Protect Sophia. Not help her. Not guide her. Protect her. I kept wondering why Grandma had written those words years before Adrian and I had ever met. By morning, I had almost convinced myself there had to be a simple explanation. Then Adrian knocked on my door. Your grandmother is awake. I followed him downstairs, still holding the photograph. The house was quiet in the early morning light. Did you find out who used Daniel Mercer's name? I asked. Adrian nodded. Yes. I stopped walking. Who was it? A former employee of the foundation. He handed me a folder. He used an old identity because he wanted access to information about Evelyn's treatment. He was not looking for her money. He was looking for something connected to the old foundation records. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents, photographs, and an old newspaper clipping about a neighborhood charity that Grandma had helped run. What is he looking for? A ledger. I looked at him. What kind of ledger? A record of families the foundation helped decades ago. I frowned. Why would that matter now? Adrian's expression softened. Because some people would rather erase their past than let anyone remember it. I looked down at the photograph again. The young boy beside Grandma suddenly seemed less like a piece of Adrian's history and more like the beginning of everything. So Grandma knew this might happen? She suspected someone could eventually come looking. And that is why she wrote the note. Yes. I swallowed. She wanted you to protect me. Adrian looked directly at me. She wanted you to have someone you could trust if she could not be there. That sentence broke something open inside me. For weeks, I had been trying to understand why Adrian kept showing up. Why he paid for Grandma's treatment. Why he remembered small things she had told him decades ago. Why he never asked me to repay him. Now I understood. This was not about ownership. It was about gratitude. And somewhere along the way, something else had grown between us. Something neither of us had planned. Grandma's treatment continued for another week. Each morning, I visited her clinic room. Each evening, Adrian checked on her before returning to his office. He never asked me to stay. He never asked me to choose him. Somehow, that made me want to stay even more. On the 7th day, Grandma's doctor walked into the room with a smile. The treatment is working. I covered my mouth with my hand. Grandma closed her eyes, and tears slipped down her cheeks. I laughed and cried at the same time. Adrian stood quietly near the window. Grandma looked at him. You kept your promise. He nodded. I always do. Later that evening, I found him outside beneath the old oak tree in his garden. The air smelled like rain. She is going to be okay, I said. I know. I stood beside him. You can stop protecting me now. He looked at me. If that is what you want. I smiled. That is the problem. I do not think I want you to stop. His expression changed. Sophia, I am not staying because Grandma needs you. I am not staying because I owe you anything. I am staying because somewhere between the hospital, the photograph, and all those quiet conversations, you became someone I trust. He looked away for a moment, then back at me. You could leave tomorrow. I know. And I would still take care of Evelyn. I know. His voice softened. Then why are you here? I took a breath. Because I choose to be. Adrian smiled, and for the first time, I saw no fear behind his eyes. Only relief. He offered his hand. I took it. Years ago, my grandmother had opened her door to a frightened boy and given him a reason to believe in kindness. Years later, that boy became a powerful man and opened his world to me when I needed help. But he never asked me to stay. That was why I could. I had walked into Adrian Blackwood's life because I wanted to save my grandmother. I stayed because, somewhere along the way, he had become the person I wanted beside me. And for the first time, choosing him did not feel like owing him anything. It felt like freedom.